Welcome back to 630 Point of View. Tonight in the Hot Box, Congressman-elect Kevin Cramer. Kevin, thanks for being here live tonight. You heard Barack Obama last night in Newtown, Connecticut. The heat is on. Even Senator Manchin came out from Virginia, lifetime member of the NRA, saying, hey, changes have to be made. You know that's going to come up here in January when you take this oath of office. Under any circumstances, will you sign a bill that will change gun laws in this country?
Well, I'm not going to answer a question that puts it to an ultimatum like that. I think it's best to never say what you're never going to do. I think we have to have a very major, big discussion about what's happening in our culture, and I think you and Rob hit it right on the head. We have to do that within the context of our Constitution, a Constitution that has a Second Amendment that guarantees the right to bear arms for law-abiding citizens. I don't want to infringe on those rights, Chris, but at the same time, I think we need to have a big discussion.
So you speak about the Second Amendment. Let me ask you this. As an average Joe, why do I need an assault rifle?
Well, I don't know that you do need an assault rifle, but it's not about whether you need one or not. It's about whether you should have the right to have an assault rifle if, in fact, you want one, for whether it's as a collector. Let's remember, we oftentimes confuse the Second Amendment with some sort of a hunting right law. It's not about hunting. It's about defending yourself against common enemies, or against even the government if that becomes the enemy. And I don't know if the Founding Fathers envisioned, this, but I suspect that they had a pretty good idea in their context. We need to preserve that. We need to consider that, but we need to have a larger discussion.
You were saying that the founders saw assault weapons in the future?
No, but what I'm saying is that at the time that the founders created the Constitution, that they knew what they were dealing with at the time. They didn't know what they were going to be dealing with in the future, what we'd be dealing with. But I think they always knew that they didn't want the only armed people in the country to be the government.
Okay, so I've got a right to have an assault weapon. You're saying, should there then be more background checks?
I do think that there could be more to a background check. And I think the incident in Connecticut, however, is an interesting example, because here's a young man who went to buy a rifle but couldn't get it because he wouldn't subject himself to a background check. So he went and got illegally acquired guns from somebody who had legally acquired them. There's no law, no bill, no rule or regulation that would have prevented what happened in Connecticut. And we have to have that type of an honest discussion.
So let me ask you this, 30 rounds in a magazine, again, as an average Joe, why do I need that?
Well, and I think that's a question that'll be debated. Should there be a limit? Should it be 50? Should it be 30? Should it be 10? What are those limits? I think all of those things will be discussed, Chris. I'm going to reserve passing a lot of judgment until we have a larger debate, because I want people who want gun control, stricter gun control laws, to hear me out too. And so I want to have this honest national debate.
So you're proposing, hey, we're going to reserve, obviously, the Second Amendment, keep those rights, and yet we're going to limit the number of rounds that can be in a magazine.
I think we need to have, no, I'm not going to say that I would vote for anything at this point, because I think to prejudge until we've heard all sides of all stories is not appropriate at this point, because I think it stymies the debate. I want to have a real open, transparent discussion. But I think that discussion has to include clergy. It has to include family advocates. It has to include educators. It has to include moms and dads and perhaps children themselves. We have a cultural challenge. You and Rob hit the nail on the head. We have to talk about this thing in a larger form, and we have to include Hollywood in this. We have to include the game makers in this. We have to include sports celebrities in this. And what is our greater responsibility? We're sitting here on TV talking about it. That's part of the problem.
What do you mean specifically?
I mean, we make celebrities out of killers. I think that's a bit of the problem.
Thus the Hunger Games reference. So let me ask you this, what do you see? I think the question last night that President Barack Obama posed was, so how do we stop this from happening in the future? Number one, is there a way to stop it? Number two, what do you see as the root cause of what happened in Newtown?
Well, I think that the first question is an important one to answer honestly. Can we stop it? Is there a way to stop it? I don't think laws stop it. This guy broke the law. The law isn't what stopped it. It's usually the case, isn't it, when somebody's murdered? And this gets very close and personal to me, as you probably know. I understand that evil, that darkness up close and personally. And it's the matter of the heart. It's not a matter of the laws. But, we've demeaned traditional families in this country. We've compromised the value of life in this country for decades. We've raised generations of kids to not respect each other, to put down traditional values. Maybe it's time to elevate those back up.
So to sum it up again, as a congressman, you're going to be asked
Yeah,
these kind of questions.
sure.
What's the solution?
Well, first of all, I don't know that there is a solution that Congress is going to instigate it. But I do think that Congress, along with other public figures, needs to have a very large, loud, clear public discourse about this that includes a lot of people. But Congress isn't going to pass a law that's going to prevent what happened in Columbine or what happened in Connecticut or all the places in between.
But then why do you think so many liberals are taking that approach?
Because they have a political agenda that has to do with de-arming law-abiding citizens in this country, and frankly, I find it quite distasteful.
But let me pose this to you.
Yes.
If you look at Japan, Japan basically has banned firearms. They've got very few, if any,
Sure.
homicides in their country.
Sure, and perhaps that's a goal that we want to get to, but at the same time...
You're saying ban
Chris,
firearms?
well, no, fewer homicides, barely any homicides, not banning firearms. But we are a country whose culture and whose history is based on freedom. It's based on liberty, and that liberty and freedom is very, very precious to us. And so we don't go down these slippery slopes of banning things lightly in our culture and in our history. We pay sometimes a high price for that liberty. But I think your graphic was pretty telling. The fact that the rate of homicides is the same today as it was, 1961 when I was born.
Shocking to me. When
Yeah.
we come back, I want to get your take on mental health. You're in a lot of
Sure.
discussions about, hey, there's been a lot of money. I saw a stat recently. States have got $1.6 billion left to work with mental health people. We're going to get to that. Plus, earlier today, I posed a question on Facebook for you. You've got some great comments. We're going to ask Congressman-elect Kevin Cramer and much more coming up next right here on 630 Point of View. Welcome back to 630 Point of View. With me tonight in the hot box, Congressman-elect Kevin Cramer. Kevin, one question I do want to get to here a lot about now. Hey, we're stripping the states of a bunch of mental health money. We just
Sure.
don't have the dollars. Do you think that could be a possible answer to put more investment into the mental health scenario in our country?
I have lots of concerns about mental health and mental illness and our treatment of it. I'm not real up to speed on necessarily the appropriations process or how much is enough or whether there's enough. I see a real deficiency in mental health services, especially to some of our returning veterans and things like that are creating lots of stress and lots of problems. And I find it to be, frankly, not just inadequate, but very, very tragic.
One of the things that's great about this show is we get a chance to get a bunch of different points of view from our audience. So earlier today, I asked a question on Facebook to get your thoughts. So I want to get to some of your comments and then give you a chance just to share your thoughts on them as well. So earlier today from Sharon, if we can bring up the graphic, please. When is the country going to realize it has nothing to do with the gun laws if we would bring God back into our society? Your thoughts?
Well, I'm getting criticized all the time, Chris, for being a radical religious personality. I think you could look at history and see that, yeah, having God in school before you have a tragedy is a better idea than going to him afterwards, but at least we're going to him. But yeah, I think we've overreacted.
But you know what, though? And I put the graphic up earlier tonight where 1961 and to 2010, the homicide rates are the same. And to be honest with you, I thought there was going to be a correlation. If you know June 11th, 1963, the Supreme Court rules no Bibles on school property. I thought, oh, man, there's going to be a definite correlation here. And there wasn't.
But I would say this, Chris, though, that issue is one issue, and that aside for a moment, it still comes back to the family and the home and parenting, and that's where real religious training needs to take place. And frankly, we have, as moms and dads, some responsibility in this that we've probably shirked over the generations.
The old black box raising our kids today.
Do I dare
Let's
say
get
that?
to Melissa's comments here as well. Melissa has to say, to me, it doesn't matter if you change the laws or not, the bad guy will always get the guns. Don't punish all of us responsible gun owners for the bad guy's stupidity.
Well, and I agree with that. I mean, laws simply restrict law-abiding citizens from having access to whatever it is you're outlining. Most laws and regulations are the result of somebody's abuse of their freedom, and it's usually an overreaction. But that said, that's not to say we shouldn't continue to have some discussion about it.
Got another comment here from Lisa. Lisa Bowler has to say, all a person has to do is look at Great Britain, where after gun control went crazy, crime increased by 89%. Also very strict gun laws in Chicago, D.C. I don't have a percentage, but there's no way that crime decreased after they were implemented. That's very true. Chicago and D.C. have some of the highest homicide rates in the country.
That's true, and there are lots of studies that could prove that, and there might be some studies that might prove something different. I don't know. But I do know this, that we have to put it in the context of our culture and our history, and we are people who fought for, died for liberty, and we're a malicious society or history at the time. We're not that far removed from our own revolution. I think we have to understand that culturally we are even different than Europe.
I mean, America today, 50% of the guns
Yes.
across the world. Here in America, we've got 5% of the population.
Yeah.
A couple more comments. Jordan Doer, I believe is the last name, says, we absolutely need to change our gun laws. We should start by reinstating the assault weapons ban that expired several years ago. Again, why do I as a layman need an assault weapon?
Well, I don't know that you do need one. I don't have one. I don't know if you do have one. It's not a matter. It's a matter of your choice of getting one if you want to have one. But you're a law-abiding citizen. Let's remember, criminals can always get their hands on guns. Not to mention, by the way, there are already lots and lots of these weapons in circulation. What would you do about those, even if you banned the sale of them today?
One of the things I thought you were going to talk about tonight was Fast and Furious. Here you've got an administration that clearly is against guns, and yet they put thousands of guns down into Mexico.
Chris, I mean, I know this sounds very nonpartisan of me, but I think right now I want to take a breath and I want to have this larger discussion. And right now I think we all need to sort of come together rather than be so divided. Frankly, I find it distasteful that Dianne Feinstein has already announced she has a bill ready to be drafted. We are a mourning nation right now, and I kind of think we ought to respect that for a little while.
We got an email that came in as well during the show. Again, go to 630pov.com to interact with our guests on the show. But this person says, I feel we need to absolutely ban any civilian from possessing any firearm that is not other than a single shotgun. People do not need semi-automatic weapons to secure their home or property. Kevin, two more questions for you. One is, where does this whole conversation end up in, say, 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, I think we need to get right into it. You know, one of the things is, while I find it distasteful that the president has already jumped on the political agenda issue and Dianne Feinstein's already got a bill drafted, I also think that events like this, of course, spark the conversation. That's why we're having this discussion. So we ought to do it while there's still some fresh wounds, and let's pray there aren't any more, you know, in the meantime. At the same time, and I want to speak to this mental health issue, we also have to guard, not only to make sure that we have enough and adequate mental health services, but also what do we do with that information? Should somebody that goes to buy a gun, should their mental health background, their mental health history be available in the decision? Now we're infringing again on these very freedoms and liberties that are so precious to the United States.
Last question for you, Nate. A very brief and quick answer. Your prediction, NDSU versus Sam Houston
Oh, of
State.
course the Bison are going to win, man. They're on the
Score?
home turf. It's home turf.
Home turf. All right, speaking of NDSU and also Adrian Peterson, Kevin, is always great to have
Great
you here.
to be with you,
Robert
always.
and I will be discussing NDSU versus Sam Houston State. Is AP going to end up breaking the rushing record against the Pack? That and more coming up on 630 Point of View. And again, go to our website, 630pov.com. Stay close.